Hey everyone, it's Bella, and today I'm gonna be doing a kind of different sort of video than I usually do, but I've always wanted to try doing kind of a monthly reading wrap-up, and this month seems to be the perfect month for it, since in June I read a really diverse range of books from nonfiction to contemporary to classics to Shakespeare. We really have it all this month, so I thought I would talk about the really amazing bunch of literature that I read this month. If this is your first time here, hi, my name is Bella. I'm an undergraduate student studying gender studies with a particular focus on literature and particularly LGBTQ+ and queer classic literature. I'm really passionate about that, so I really love to share that passion here on my channel. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely subscribe. I would love to have you here. So the first book I want to discuss is Babel by R.F. Kuang. So I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be pronounced Babel, not Babel. I'm not sure, but I'm just gonna use Babel. I absolutely adored this book, just to start. This was something that I was really interested in as soon as I heard of it. R.F. Kuang is already an incredible author in my mind. She's an author that I always want to read her work, so definitely go check out her other works if you're not familiar. But Babel is sort of a dark academia fantasy sort of novel. So Babel primarily takes place at a fictionalized and sort of sensationalized Oxford of the 1800s. And it follows a boy named Robin Swift, who is originally from Canton, China, and is taken to a translation institute called Babel at this fictional Oxford to be in this sort of translation school. So I had a difficult time trying to figure out how exactly the magic system worked. So to explain it kind of simply, translation is a sort of magic in this universe, which I think is just so genius. I love the concept of that. The book is quite academically interesting as well. It goes into linguistics and the origins of words and how meaning is sort of lost when you try to go from one language to the other, and how there's sort of a magic in that kind of shift in meaning from one language to another. I was totally blown away by that concept, and I was just so eager to learn more about that, how all of that works. The first part of the book, you see a very romanticized and very beautiful portrayal of this fictional Oxford, but as we follow Robin Swift, we kind of realize that this magic of translation is rooted in quite a lot of evil, and specifically used as a tool for colonialism and imperialism. The character development in this book is just phenomenal. We see how a character becomes radicalized and how Robin becomes aware of the role that his translation institute is playing into colonialism and imperialism and global politics, and genuinely is one of the most leftist pieces of modern fiction that I've ever read. And that's not something you would usually expect from a dark academia novel, but I really love how R.F. Kuang flips that genre on its head and really calls out the colonial origins of higher education, specifically in Oxford. Back to the radical political nature of this book, I really love how it brings up the question of violence and the necessity of violence. How when colonizers use violence to oppress others, that really the only thing that can take down these very systematic structures is violence itself, and that radical political revolution cannot really be successful in totally dismantling the oppressors without violence. And I really love that book for exploring that idea. This book is just a spectacular response to the current political landscape and cultural moment. Of course, the writing is superb and the plot is so masterfully crafted. I think the only thing that I disliked about this book is some of the academic jargon might be kind of difficult for people to understand if they're not sort of formally educated. I think it might bog down some readers who aren't familiar with academic language, but really that's such a small thing and it's not even anything I disliked. But overall, I think this book is so accessible, and it's a very fast-paced kind of story that I personally read through very fast, even though I have ADHD and I tend to be a very slow reader. But yes, Babel is amazing and I would absolutely recommend it to you. So the next book that I read in June was an audiobook that I read, and that is Feminism is for Everybody by Bell Hooks. So if you don't know, for the past kind of semester, I haven't taken any gender studies classes since when I transferred to my new university. I had to take a lot of prerequisites, but this upcoming fall I'm finally getting back into my major, which is, I'm just so beyond excited. So I kind of wanted to brush off my theory and read something kind of very simple and a very good introduction to gender studies. So if you're interested in gender studies and you want to study it at university, or you just kind of casually interested and want to dabble in feminist theory, I think this book is absolutely perfect. In the introduction, Bell Hooks discusses how this is the book that she wanted to have when she was younger and wants other people to have as a very introductory sort of manual for feminist politics and feminist theory. Bell Hooks discusses everything in this book, and the one thing that I love about her writing is that it's so accessible. Truly anybody can pick up this book and learn so much. This book truly is what it claims to be, and that is a very thorough, encompassing sort of introduction to feminism. So if anyone kind of came up to me and asked me, if I want to learn about feminism, what should I read? I would totally direct them towards this book. And it was really great to read because it kind of reintroduced me to concepts that are very foundational in my knowledge. But the way that Bell Hooks describes these theories really makes me think about how I can apply them to my daily life, which is something that you don't see often in academic theory. Bell Hooks is very grounded in the real world and wants you to apply this theory, because without action, theory is really just useless. So this book really is just a phenomenal tool and introduction to feminism. Right, the next book that I read this June is Morris by E.M. Forster. So this is the book that I read with my book club, Athenian Reads. If you want more information about it, I have a video up here that you can watch. Basically, my book club is all about LGBTQ queer classic literature, and it's so fun. We discuss books on Babel and on my Instagram. For June, for Pride Month, actually, we decided to read Morris by E.M. Forster. I've talked about this book a billion times on this channel, and if you know me personally, you know that I'm obsessed with it, and for a good reason, because it's just a beautiful, beautiful queer love story that is one of the first novels written about queer people to have a happy ending, which I just think is so hopeful and beautiful. And I think if you're interested in classic literature and queer literature, this is just a must read. It's so foundational. So this book was written during 1913 and 1914, but was never published during Forster's lifetime and was only published in 1971, which I think is such a crucial detail to say about this book. One of the things that the members of my book club felt really strongly about this book was how beautifully written it is. I don't use tabs, but I promise you I have written all over this book. The quotes are just magnificently beautiful, and the character work specifically is something that I always come back to in this book. These characters are so tangible and real and are so flawed and very deeply complex, and to this day I still don't even fully understand these characters and I haven't fully unpacked them. It's that detailed and that immersive. It's just beautiful. The next book, or I should say play, that I read this month is The Winter's Tale by William Shakespeare. So this specific Shakespeare play was recommended very highly to me from quite a few friends, and I've always heard very good things about it. And while this play isn't one of Shakespeare's most famous plays, I really think it's one of his most beautiful. It's very interesting because it's neither a tragedy or a comedy. It starts out very much in the style of Shakespeare's tragedies, with the King of Sicily going mad with jealousy and dooming everyone around him. But by the second half of the play, things very much turn around and we have moments that are also very funny as well. And something so awesome is one of my friends kind of described it as sort of like a Disney Channel comedy, which I kind of get because it starts in a very dramatic way, but then everything kind of works out in the end in that very kind of Disney way, if that makes sense. But I just really loved this play because I think the characters are just so wonderful. Specifically, I really enjoyed the female characters in this book. I really love this one specific monologue. I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's just this incredible monologue where one of the women in the book has been done wrong, and one of her friends goes in front of the king's court to defend her, and I think it's just one of the most powerful moments in Shakespeare that I've ever read, and it was just chilling and I loved it. Something else about The Winter's Tale that is really beautiful is the imagery. You would expect by the play's title, The Winter's Tale, to be quite wintry, but it's very centered around springtime and pastoral imagery and flowers and plants. It is genuinely just some of Shakespeare's most gorgeous prose, and I really loved reading it. Personally, I'm trying to get more into Shakespeare, so if you have any favorite plays that you think I should read, definitely comment them down below, especially kind of more unknown ones. I want to give those a try. I've never studied Shakespeare formally either, so it's more of just kind of a hobby that I've picked up to try and consume and understand more of Shakespearean literature. I just think it's really fun. That was one thing I really wanted to read this June. So the last book that I read this month was something I've always wanted to read, and that is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I've always been very fascinated by Tolkien and his life and his creativity. While normally I'm not a fantasy person, I think I've learned about myself is that I'm just not a modern fantasy person. I find that I really enjoy fairy tales that are very classic and have a very antiquated language that is kind of the pinnacle of the Tolkien world. And if you know me, you know that I just absolutely love classic literature, and I really wanted to give The Hobbit as well as The Lord of the Rings a go. I plan on reading the Lord of the Rings trilogy quite soon, but as for this book, I just loved it so much. It was so much fun. It's so whimsical and joyful, and I love the character Bilbo Baggins. I think he's so funny. I love the company of dwarves. I think they're just hilarious. And I can see why this is a classic. It is such a quintessential fairy tale, but also not quite, because the way that these characters kind of interact with each other and grow and evolve, it feels very unique. And even the story itself, the story kind of goes in a particular direction, and I expected it to end in a very predictable way, but it didn't end in the way that I thought it was going to end. And instead, it kind of explores not good versus evil, but it goes a lot deeper. In this way, it reminds me of a lot of Hayao Miyazaki's movies, where the conflict between these different forces isn't between good and evil, but it's a lot more complex than that. For that to be shown in a children's fairy tale, I think was so incredible. And the way that all of these characters kind of unite for the greater good, I think is part of some really incredible storytelling. It's such a beautiful story that I had so much fun with. I think one of the best parts are the kind of poems and songs that are scattered throughout. And I always had a great time kind of trying to sing them in the characters' voices in my head. And I think that's a very childish thing to do, but in a good way, because I think we're never too old for fairy tales, and this book really made me connect with my inner child again, which it was just such a beautiful reading experience. So I would say, even if you're not really into fantasy like I am, but really enjoy classic literature and beautiful storytelling, I think this would be perfect for you. All right, and those are all of the books that I read in the month of June. I really had a phenomenal reading month. I always try to diversify the things that I'm reading. I tried to get some poetry in, some nonfiction, contemporary classics. I think this month really was the pinnacle of all of that. I'm really proud of how much I'm able to read, but I am always trying to read more literature and consume as much as I can. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to what I have to say about these books. Sharing my thoughts on books and talking about literature is genuinely my passion, and I am so excited to start doing that again here on this channel. So if you want to hear more literary opinions from me, do subscribe. And again, if you want to join my book club, all of the information is below in the description. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.